Hi folks, we need to talk about the Crimes of Grindelwald. I have a lot of thoughts, so this is going to be my spoiler-filled review. If you want to see my spoiler-free thoughts, head over to my Instagram where I've done a little series of stories that I've put in my highlights, and that will be there for a couple of weeks. But yes, this is going to be full of spoilers, and what I'm going to do is go through each character and sort of review their plot line, or lack thereof in some cases, because I think that's what the biggest issue with this film was, that there were too many characters, too many new characters, and the old characters we only cared about because of the context of the first Fantastic Beasts film. So I'm gonna grab my list from here, and I'm gonna go in order of appearance. Grindelwald. And so I went into this with obviously frustration about the casting of Johnny Depp, and something of a boiling hatred of his character because of that. I don't know if my my feelings towards the character are to do with that, or to do with the way that Grindelwald is written and acted. It's quite difficult, for me at least, to separate those things. But many people have said that it was a fantastic performance, and you know, you can say many things about Johnny Depp, but he is a very good actor. And I don't think he was right for this role artistically either. But you know, it does sort of take you out of a film, I think, when you go, oh, that's Johnny Depp doing his Johnny Depp thing. I think he got the nuances of the character, and there was this sense of threat, but also of kind of softness, which was unexpected. He's definitely not a Voldemort kind of character, so that's nice. I appreciate that. Yeah, I feel as though going forward this is going to continue to be a complicated issue. Yeah, separating the two is practically impossible. But in terms of his storyline, to be honest, I was a bit disappointed, because this is the main story arc of the film. It's the main plot, really, and I'm going to talk about the secondary one in a minute. But it's called The Crimes of Grindelwald, and he doesn't do much crime in it. In fact, most of the time he's getting other people to do his dirty work, which, yeah, is still him doing bad things or condoning bad things. But yeah, it didn't seem to warrant the title, for starters. And let's be honest, we knew from the trailers, and we knew from the end scene of Fantastic Beasts, when he says, "You think you can hold me?" We know he's going to escape. That's kind of number one thing we expected to happen. It happens in the first scene of this film, and nobody was surprised. And then that's pretty much where he is at the end of the film. He's got a few new followers. A few of them have dropped off. But apart from that, it's really, he hasn't gone much further forward. We know that he's gathering power and convincing people, and it's all about his rhetoric and all of that. But yeah, there's very little from the beginning to the end that has changed for him. He hasn't gone and done anything grand. He hasn't done some big demonstration in front of the Muggles or anything like that. So yeah, I was expecting a little bit more from that story arc. And yeah, we'll get to the next story arcs, because I sort of see his arc, or lack thereof, and Credence's as being the two main ones, and then we've got lots and lots of tiny subplots, some of which get only a couple of minutes of screen time, and honestly I don't think they needed to be there. The thing is with all of this is it's not going to be clear what's important until we have the next film, which is frustrating, and I do feel as though this film should stand on its own, and it doesn't at all. It very much feels like a bridge between one great film and hopefully another great film, but yeah, this in itself didn't work. Right, then we've got Abernathy. We saw Abernathy in the previous Fantastic Beasts films, mostly being a bit rude to the Goldstein sisters, but apart from that, he was a bit kind of banal. But yeah, in this one, he has turned to the dark side and he helps Grindelwald escape. But apart from that, he doesn't do a great deal, and he hasn't really got an arc exactly. To be honest, he seems very similar to how he was in the first Fantastic Beasts film. He's just a sort of tireless bureaucrat. A brief appearance from Serafina Picquery. There's the guy who just sort of appears and then disappears. I think he's probably later in the casting, but I was confused as to why he was there. He's the one who Grindelwald, when they're in Paris, approaches him and he sounds threatened, and he says that, well, Dumbledore is the greatest threat to the wizarding world and to Grindelwald, and then at the end he dies. I'm not really sure why he was there. That role could have very easily been filled by Abernathy or any of the others, Rosier, any of them. So yeah, that was a bit strange to me. All right, then we have Newt Scamander, who is woefully underused in this film. I mean, he was so at the heart of the first film, and that's what made it such a delightful experience, is that, I mean, Eddie Redmayne's acting is superb in the first one and in this one, but we don't get nearly enough of it. And at the beginning, when we see him for the first time, we have these really strange, uncomfortable close-ups, which when you're in the theatre, there's no getting away from it. It's Eddie Redmayne's face in front of you, enormous, and then Lita Lestrange, Zoe Kravitz's face, and then Theseus's face. It's all very it's a bit much. So Newt doesn't have a great deal to do in this film, and I think he was mostly there for continuity. But yeah, he certainly doesn't change as a character over the course of the film. I mean, his hand is forced. That's his story arc, is that he says at the beginning that he doesn't like to pick sides, but it's clear from the previous film which side he's on. He's on the side of the people who don't kill children. I mean, nobody is surprised when he picks the side of Dumbledore, which he was always on. I mean, I'm not quite sure why that was such a big thing, or he didn't want to declare himself because he's basically a pacifist and doesn't like the idea of fighting with anyone. I just would have liked to have seen more of Newt. I mean, the Nifflers were a highlight, obviously, and I think that was one of the best bits of the film, was where the Niffler goes and steals the blood pact from Grindelwald, and voila, they have it. So that was quite clever, and a good actual use of the beasts, because apart from that, I don't think they come in very useful. Mostly they just kind of get in the way a little bit, or don't seem to have a purpose in the film, and that's an overall theme of the film, I think, is that there are all these things that seem inconsequential. And like I said, we may find in the next film that these little things were important, but it doesn't feel like that at the moment. Lita Lestrange, played by Zoe Kravitz. Again, an excellent performance. I mean, excellent performances all round, really. She was fascinating. I wanted a bit more from her, as in more screen time. To be honest, I'm not sure why the whole baby swap plot was in there and what purpose it served. Unless it's going to turn out later that Corvus Lestrange actually survived or something. I mean, there were many ways of explaining how Credence got to where he was, and yeah, at this stage it doesn't seem as though it's that important to the overall story of Grindelwald and Credence and all of that. But I mean, I may be wrong, but at this point it's hard to see how that's relevant, really, and maybe it could have been explained in a much simpler, less confusing way. I went to see this with my mum, and she came out of the cinema completely befuddled, completely confused, and to be honest, I felt pretty confused walking out, because there were so many threads that didn't seem to have been tied up or didn't seem to be necessary. I mean, I understood what was going on, but yeah, it was just just perplexing and a bit frustrating. And it took me a couple of days to sort of think over it before I started to get my ideas straight about it. And I think I will go and see it again for that reason, because it's so confusing. Anyway, then we've got Theseus, who I thought we were just not going to like, because you get the impression from the first film that he and Newt don't really get along, and I think you get a bit of that, but I mean, Newt's not getting along with somebody seems to mean, you know, not wanting to hug them, or I don't know. They didn't seem at odds with each other that much. Obviously, they have different worldviews. Theseus works for the ministry and stands for the sorts of things that Newt doesn't like. Authority, and Theseus is clearly more like Tina in that he's a rule follower and a rule enforcer. Yeah, so I thought that their dynamic was really nice. I appreciated that, and the dynamic between the two of them and Lita as well. I really liked all of that, and the acting was superb. Just a shame that there wasn't a bit more of it, but I liked the way the theme of hugging sort of threaded its way through, and I really like Theseus as a character. And given that the clips that we were shown before the film, you know, in trailers and things, of them kind of fighting but also fighting side by side, I thought that there was going to be more animosity between the two of them. And to be honest, I thought that it was Theseus who was going to die at the end, because we have this prophecy, you know, sort of going on through it that, yeah, somebody's going to die at the graveyard. Given how much time had been put into Lita and her backstory, I didn't think it was going to be her. Obviously, there's a greater pathos around that because we've had this tragic backstory, and Newt still seems to have feelings for her, and clearly Theseus does, being engaged to her. I thought that was an awful lot of work to put into a character only to kill them off, whereas less work had been put into Theseus, and it would have had the same emotional impact, but it would have been different. But clearly Theseus must be important for future films, but I got the impression that Lita Lestrange was, given how much of their, you know, there were flashbacks and this importance of the Lestrange name as well, and how she is different and not different from her family. So yeah, that was a bit of a surprise. I mean, obviously we knew somebody was going to die. I just didn't think it was going to be her. Credence again does not get enough screen time. We go into the film and he is at this circus. It's not quite clear what he does at the circus and how he got there. He has magical blood, obviously, but he's not magical. He hasn't been trained. This is why the Obscurus is a thing. So how he ends up in a magical circus, maybe he acts as a squib, I don't know. He seems to be doing kind of menial tasks, and that's how he meets Nagini. Yeah, so Credence, everybody's looking for Credence. That seems to be the second, or even it's a part of the main storyline. So it's a little bit like Fantastic Beasts Where to Find Them in that sense, because everyone's looking for the Obscurial, and in this one they're still looking for him. Everyone seems to know where he is, but nobody's kind of caught up with him. And then he's going around asking people if they're his mum, and he's not having much luck. I will talk about the twist at the end in a bit, but yeah, I think I wanted to see more of his character develop, more than him just going around being curious about things, which obviously is part of his character. And I love the way that Ezra Miller portrays his character. He still has that very hunched look to him. He's still clearly very insecure in himself, and that makes that final scene where he's suddenly finally standing up straight for the first time, he has a wand in his hand, all the more powerful. Obviously that's sort of the least of the things that you're thinking about at that point. I'm interested to see how his character will develop, because he certainly doesn't seem like an evil character. He seems to, his motivations for going to Grindelwald's side are clear. But how much manipulation is going on there is up in the air at the moment. Obviously, the whole first film was about him being manipulated by Grindelwald. But yeah, I guess we will see on that front. And then there's the reveal at the end. It's not clear whether we should take that at face value or not. I do believe that Grindelwald could summon up some kind of either an actual phoenix or some kind of apparition that would make the same effect. However, that Credence doesn't know the history of the phoenix. Grindelwald tells him a little bit about it and how his family is. It's kind of his blood right, but it's Dumbledore who tells us about the story of the phoenix earlier on in the film, which sets that up. So it's only a payoff for us. It's not a payoff for Credence because he didn't hear what Dumbledore said. So that as a trick wouldn't work. So it's only to prove to us, the audience, that is the case. So that makes me think that yeah, it is a real phoenix, and that he is in some way a real Dumbledore, which is perplexing. Obviously, it goes against the canon that we know, and there are theories on how this could be the case. It could be that Ariana's Obscurus left her and found a new host in Credence, in which case a part of her may live on in Credence, which obviously makes the whole thing a bit more sinister, and certainly things are not going to end well for Credence. We can see that now, really. It's not going to be a happy ending for him. I don't know. I think he's probably not a Dumbledore on face value, and that it probably is something like that as an explanation. It would explain why Grindelwald wants Credence, because he knows that is a card he can play against Dumbledore. All right, then we have a character called Grimson, who is a sinister looking guy, but we don't really know why he's sinister. He just, there's just threatening music whenever he's on screen. And apparently, somebody on Instagram told me this, that it's in the screenplay it says that he is a beast hunter for hire, which explains everything, and then you wouldn't even have needed the sinister music. But I don't quite know how they would have explained that. It would have probably required an extra scene, and this film had too many scenes already. But yeah, he doesn't have a great deal to do. Turns out he's a follower of Grindelwald. Nobody's really surprised. Yeah, let's move on. We have Rosier, who is beautiful and French and has a slightly weird scene with Queenie. But apart from that, she just seems to be Grindelwald's right-hand man, right-hand woman, like holding this skull thing. Yeah, she doesn't do a great deal apart from that, but I'm glad that she didn't have a whole storyline of her own, because there were enough of those. And then we have Jude Law as Dumbledore, which was another highlight of this film for me. I thought Jude Law's performance was flawless. He really captured that twinkly-eyed Dumbledore that we all love, and to be honest, I think his Dumbledore is truer to the book Dumbledore than either of the performances that we saw in the Harry Potter films. I mean, obviously we never saw Richard Harris do the more complex Dumbledore. In the first two films he is very much that grandfatherly figure, so it's great casting in that respect. And then Michael Gambon is just... that's my best description. Not very true to the books, but it's not surprising because he didn't read them. Yeah, it's clear that Jude Law has done his research, and yeah, I totally buy it that he's young Dumbledore. So, talking about Dumbledore, we need to talk about the scene with the Mirror of Erised, and a few people have pointed out that that's not what the Mirror of Erised does. It shows you what you most desire, not the past. But I think probably what Dumbledore most desires is the past. He wants to go back to that time when he and Grindelwald were friends, probably more than friends. I mean, we're almost certain more than friends. And I mean, maybe he wants to change the past, maybe he just wants to live in that time of ignorance, but obviously he knows he can't go back. So yeah, I think that scene is really beautiful. Obviously I would have liked for it to be a little clearer about their relationship, but on reflection, no mirror pun intended, I think we're seeing at least some foreshadowing of a further exploration of their relationship. So I have a little more hope about how they're going to do that now than I did before. Yeah, still wish that they could just get to the point, but yeah. There's that. Oh, and then we have another new character who is there and then gone, called Bunty. When she appeared, I thought, oh my goodness, another new character. I like her, but we didn't get very much time with her at all. Again, probably just as well that she didn't have her own subplot and storyline. We have a weird line about her asking Newt to take off his shirt, and it's not clear if she's being, practical because he's about to dive into some water, or whether she fancies Newt. Not really clear. Yeah, I thought that was quite an awkward moment. Either way, I suppose they needed to explain that somebody was there looking after the creatures. I don't know. I don't think she served much purpose in this, but maybe she will in the future. Then we have Jacob. Jacob's back. Jacob does nothing in this film apart from be a love interest for Queenie, which, to be honest, I'm all about. Usually it's a woman who is in that role of just, being there to drive the plot forward. So I appreciated that it was a bloke here. I mean, he has some funny lines, and he's always just fun to be around. He would definitely be in Hufflepuff. He doesn't have a great deal of agency or anything, and he's just kind of bumbling along. But that's all right. That doesn't bother me. Obviously, the storyline between him and Queenie is of great interest. To be honest, I think that was one of the most interesting in the story, but it's more to do with Queenie than Jacob. So I will get to that now because she's next on my list. The scene where Jacob and Queenie turn up out of the blue at Newt's flat in London is a little bit perplexing. For one thing, the love charm that is done, that Queenie puts on Jacob, seems completely unnecessary and a bit out of character, but we can see from right at the beginning that something is off with Queenie. And only 6 months have gone by at this point, but she seems to have become quite a different person. She's gone down a darker road, and I like that. And I like that. I mean, it's not explored to the extent that I would like to have seen, but we do see her, Jacob sort of accidentally calling her crazy or calling her behaviour crazy, and clearly she takes that to heart. And that's something that isn't really explored in the first film. Being a legilimens and being able to read people's minds, we don't really know the extent of this power, but I think from this film we can gather that she can hear the thoughts of everyone around her, that it's all kind of, it's sensory overload, and we know that Queenie is a very sensitive person. She's a very caring, kind person, so for somebody who's so empathetic to have that much input from other people must be completely overwhelming. So that read really well, I thought. It seemed like a logical consequence of her condition, her powers, whatever you want to call it. Some people have suggested that she is under the Imperious Curse, and that's how she ends up on Grindelwald's side. I don't think she is. I don't think she's acting that out of character, and we do see that progression over the film. A heartbreaking moment when she goes over, but I do think she stepped through that fire of her own free will. I bought it, and I think it worked really well. It was probably the most compelling of the storylines in this. Also because it was kept quite simple. It was very easy to understand. Then we got Tina, who is not in this film enough. Oh my goodness, I love Tina. She is probably my favourite character in this series, and while in the first film she has lots of agency, she has clear motivations, she has a clear plot line and arc, In this, she really doesn't, which is such a shame. So her main motivation seems to be to find Credence, as many of the characters' motivations seem to be. She doesn't really succeed in this until we get to the end. She's sort of got together with lots of different characters. We have a nice moment between her and Newt, because she has somehow got the wrong end of the stick about Leda Lestrange. So to be honest, I don't have a lot to say about Tina, but I was just disappointed by the lack of her in this film, and yeah, the lack of a story arc. Then we have Claudia Kim as Nagini. I honestly don't know why they decided to do the reveal about Nagini before this film, because her name is uttered once from memory. I've only seen the film once, but you know, Credence says it right at the beginning. That's how she's introduced, and then nothing. So apart from that, she seems to exist. She's kind of like Jacob's character in this film. She doesn't do much. I think she turns into a snake at 2 different points, but apart from that, she's there to be a sort of soundboard for Credence and as emotional support for him. So their relationship is sort of hinted at, but it's not very clear. And I suspect that the reason that is there is so that, you know, she's a reason for Credence to come back to the side of good, or Credence is a reason for her to go to the side of Grindelwald. Maybe she's justified in being in this film, but it didn't feel as though she had enough to do. We've got Yusuf Kama, who, again, I'm not quite sure why he's in this film. Obviously, I can see his role in the narrative of finding out about Lita's brother and how the switch happened and all of that. But he again seems to serve as a sounding board. I feel as though that role could have been filled by one of the other characters. So I'm assuming that he is going to have a bigger role in future films, and that's why he's there. Seems a shame that another one of the characters of colour is really sidelined and doesn't have a great deal of, well, maybe has more point in the film than is clear at the moment, but I just feel as though it needs to be clear within the space of the film. You know, there needs to be some justification of why a character exists. But yeah, we'll see. Okay, we treat it as a series, and yeah, we've got another 2 years to wait. Okay, then we've got a cameo from McGonagall, which was nice, and I mean her character was awesome in this, the tiny bit that we saw of her. However, it has been pointed out that she doesn't really fit within the timeline. She shouldn't have been born yet, and that's a little bit complicated. Then finally, we have got Nicholas Flamel. Again, another character who I have no idea why he is in this film. May just be because he is going to be in the next film, and he's important because of something to do with the Philosopher's Stone and alchemy and all of that, in which case fine, but it could have just been a tiny cameo. Instead, he has a more screen time than seems necessary, and to be honest, I would have preferred to have seen more of somebody like Tina, or a bit more depth on Queenie's story, or any of the other major characters, than have this strange longer period of time focusing on a character who doesn't do a lot except waves his wand a bit at the end. So I'm hoping that all of this adds up to something that makes more sense than it does at the moment. So what have we learned from this film that we didn't know before? Well, we know that Grindelwald is free and is recruiting followers, but we knew that from the trailer already. We also know that he now has Queenie and Credence on his side. We know that Credence is alive. We did know that before, but he's a Dumbledore. This is very new information. And I feel as though if you're going to have a big reveal like that, there need to have been enough clues beforehand to suggest that that's the case. We shouldn't be going, what? We should be going, ah! You know, it should be a Remus Lupin is a werewolf kind of moment, where all the pieces fall into place and you go, of course that's that's what's happened. Instead, everybody is blindsided, and that makes it far less satisfying. When you look at all the Harry Potter books and films, they're mystery stories. There's a mystery there, but there are enough clues that even if you couldn't figure it out yourself, that it makes sense when the reveal happens. Not the case here. So I'm hoping that that gets explained pretty early on in the next film, and we don't have a whole nother film explaining how he's a Dumbledore. But that was quite frustrating. And then we also know that Credence was switched as a baby with somebody called Corvus Lestrange, and I do not know why this is important. I don't know why that wasn't just explained or brushed over. I mean, yeah, it was a way to bring Lita into it, but yeah, I'm not sure why that was a thing. And again, I hope that there's some payoff for all of this, this whole film basically, because we find out very little. The characters haven't really moved that much from the beginning, apart from a few obvious exceptions. It doesn't seem to have a complete story arc in itself. At least not a strong enough one to bring the whole film with it. And the thing with subplots are great and they can be done really well, but they need to be used either to further the overarching plot or to reflect themes. And some of the subplots do reflect themes. Certainly we've got brotherhood and we've got, you know, the loss of a sibling. Dumbledore and Lita's stories are paralleled in some ways, but I don't think any of it is strong enough to have either the emotional impact or the plot relevancy that was needed for this. Those are my thoughts on Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald, at least for now. I will go and see it again, I think, and probably take notes, because that's the kind of person I am. But I would love to start a conversation down in the comments if you've seen this film and disagree with anything that I've said, or think that I've misconstrued anything, or if you just want to have a discussion. Yeah, that's the place to do it. Overall, not very impressed by the whole thing of this film, but as a visual spectacle, as a fan and wanting to get more information, we have got more information, just not maybe as much as we were hoping for. But now we've got several years of unpacking all of this and making up theories and doing further research on these things. So yeah, I really enjoy that side of this fandom and some other fandoms, but Harry Potter most of all, because you know, it's Harry Potter. All right, as always, thank you very much for watching, and well done if you got this far. I will see you in the next video. Yeah, until then, bye.